Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. In today's video we're going to take a look at the new and upcoming Zero Tolerance 0055. This is a collaboration with custom knife maker Gus Cecchini of Brazil and of course Zero Tolerance USA. And this is the last model to come to market from their SHOT Show 2017 debuts. And the thing that makes this knife really interesting is of course the spring-loaded tab system. So essentially it's a flipper tab that has springs and it disappears back into essentially a recessed position on the knife, whether it's closed or fully open. So we'll take a look at this in a bit more detail. Of course we'll start out with the specs, we'll go into the overall impressions, then we'll take a look at the details. So the knife does ship with the standard zero tolerance box, and that's because this model is a standard production run. It's not limited edition, it's not sprint run, it's not any of those things, and so it'll be readily available at some point. Of course there's going to be some initial demand and it might be hard to find it first, but anyhow, let's get into it. So for the specs, bring in the Paramilitary 2. Alright, so we have a blade length of 3.75 inches, handle length of 5 inches, giving us an overall of 8.75. The blade, or the knife itself, weighs in at 5 ounces, thanks to some pretty heavy skeletonizing or internal pocket milling on this particular knife. And it is a titanium frame lock flipper. Blade steel is S35VN, and yeah, it does run on the KBT ball bearing system, of course, so very smooth, and the action is quite nice. We'll move this out of the way. One other detail, I guess, is the handle thickness at 0.56 inches. Alright, overall impressions. So I thought it was pretty cool when they did the debut and I saw that Airborne was coming to market, thought it was an interesting design, and then I realized that it incorporated the spring-loaded tab, or the SLT system, and at that point I was ecstatic. Gus's knives, well, Gus is a custom maker. He is known for doing really innovative, creative things that are definitely outside of the box. I think probably him and Grant and Gavin Hawk, they're the ones who, they're inventors. They come up with really interesting things, and the spring-loaded tab was one of those systems. But his custom knives are quite expensive, and I always thought that that system was going to be out of reach. So when I saw that ZT had picked it up, I was ecstatic, because ZT does an amazing job with execution, and I wasn't going to be let down. And I definitely wasn't. So I had this knife, I was able to pick it up a bit early. This is a pre-production run, and I handed it to a lot of people at Blade Show to check out, and everyone loved it. The action, the way that it functioned, from people who buy knives for heavy use to custom collectors to guys who collect multi-thousand-dollar knives. Everyone really liked it. All of the production companies I handed it to were really impressed with it, and they all wanted to take it apart to see how it worked. And the other really cool thing is that this knife is coming to market, or coming to street or dealers, at $220 street price. So pretty fair price, considering that you're getting into a feature or a system that typically would cost several $1,000s. So again, that's why I was so excited about it. Will we see it on more knives in the future? The answer is yes. There'll be other knives outside of Gus's designs that I think will have it. I don't know which ones or when or how or any of those things. Of course, that's all a little bit preemptive, considering that this one isn't quite out yet to the market. So yeah, really well executed. Blade centering is spot on. Action, really nice. It's a fun system. Ergonomics are good. Rock solid. So all the things that we have come to expect from ZT as a company. Alright, so those are my overall impressions. Let's take a look at some of the details and talk a little bit more about this knife and about the interesting system on it. So S35VN, it uses a compound ground blade, high height flat in the front, mid height flat in the back, and essentially the theory behind it is you get less material behind the edge. When you're doing cutting like envelopes or packages or whatever you might be using this for, you get a little bit cleaner slices here in the front. The back portion that has more steel behind the edge you know, if you want to do something a bit more heavy duty, you want to kind of bear down on it. Obviously, it's safer here with you know, a little bit more material behind the edge. So that's the reason behind the compound ground blade. A lot of people think they're impractical, but 2 different flat grinds really is not. The transition is minimal, and compound ground blades are something that everyone wants to say that they're not interested in, but all the custom orders that people order from knife makers, when given option for a compound ground blade, they always go for it because it's more interesting and it's more difficult for the knife maker to do. So it is what it is. You know, is it impractical? No. Is it as good as a full flat ground blade for slicing? No, but it has its merits. So again, that's how I feel about compound ground blades in general. Of course, there are ones that are super impractical. This is not one of those. Let's take a look at the markings. Again, S35VN, no jimping up top. Really nice edge on this one. Now, as I mentioned, this is a pre-production run here. They only did a small handful of these, and in the actual production run will have some changes to the blade. The grind will actually come down a little bit more like this. They just picked up a brand new 4-axis CNC, and with those new capabilities on that very expensive machine, they decided to execute the blade more in line with Gus's custom work, and you know, a little bit better grinds, things of that sort. They'll also make some changes to the flipper tab here once it actually comes to market. I think the size or something along those lines, there'll be a small change to that, so it'll be fun to grab one of those and you know, show you guys the comparisons at some point. I will do a takedown video of this knife. I typically don't do those, but I think this is a system interesting enough, or a knife interesting enough to merit a takedown, so that will be a separate video. Alright, let's get an up-close look at the spring-loaded tab system. So SLT, GTC, and this is actually different from his spring-loaded tab on his custom knives. On his custom knives, it's more of just a flat, you know, rectangular tab, and with this one, it's more of kind of a rounded, you know, gun hammer. It does have jimping so that you get a lot of catch on the finger. And after I picked up this knife, I went over to Gus. I found him at the show, and I said, hey, they made some changes to your SLT system. How do you feel about it? And much to my surprise, genuine surprise, he said that it was an improvement over his system, which I was, you know, kind of shocked to hear that a maker would say that about a production company, you know, producing his system at mass. So very cool, very easy to use, very comfortable. It's a lot like a gun trigger. You have your uptake, you hit your wall, clean break, and deployment, of course. So very smooth on the KVT ball bearing system. This knife actually employs 4 sets of bearings, which is quite interesting. So obviously you have a set on each side of the blade, and then there's actually a set of bearings on each side of the flipper tab, along with a compression spring, which is what gives this nice, smooth, and springy action, of course. Obviously it needs to go back down into its proper position, so pretty interesting to hear that there are 4 sets of bearings on this. We do have a pivot here that mimics Gus's custom pivots, of course. And then you can see an interesting cutout in the frame here that obviously gives it space for the flipper tab. So let's pull that up. There you can see how it works in. Let's see if we can get a look at some of the internal milling. So again, that's just a teaser. We'll do obviously up close when I take it down. So Torx pivots, or Torx screws, stainless steel lock insert, and there is a nice cutout here for the frame, so you can access the lock bar quite easily. Very easy to disengage. Ergonomics are surprisingly good. The shape is very conducive to the hand, and I can get a very solid purchase on it despite there being no jimping at all. So there are also no visible screws here on the show side. They are on the lock side only for a cleaner aesthetic. Pocket clip can be tip up left and right hand carry. So let's talk about the pocket clip. So when I picked this one up, I was obviously talking to the guys over there at ZT, and I said, why did you guys go with a bent spring clip on such a cool knife? And the response was, well, we paid Gus for this design to be able to manufacture it. Why would we stray from the original design when we, we're paying him for the design, or he's getting, his royalties or whatever it is on it? And I said, okay, that's a fair point. And so obviously this is in line with the, custom airborne model. And something that Gus does that's really interesting is, if you guys can see here, we have essentially different peaks and valleys, and Gus tries to make his pocket clips as minimal as possible so that they're non-obtrusive. And so as you can see, this bent spring clip here is kind of down in this little valley as compared to the peak here, and so it makes the pocket clip sit lower on the knife than it otherwise would if it was at the same height. So he does it to kind of even a greater extent on some of his other models where the entire pocket clip is in a recess. And yeah, I've never handled any of those, but they look really interesting. Pocket extraction is really easy. The 2 screws here plus the millwork right here makes it very, very positive to grab out. And some nice milling and millwork on this one. Lanyard hole. Aluminum backspacer that's been hard anodized blue. So, alright, let's talk about the difficulty. So this was the last one to come to market, and it was because it was actually quite difficult to produce. Gus sent in the design, and the design was handed over to their in-house custom maker, Tim Galen, a very well-renowned custom maker. Then it was his task, or his job, to take the SLT system and be able to produce it kind of in large quantities, in a production line. And so he had to tweak and refine and figure out how they could produce this at scale. And then the second part, the difficult part, was once he'd figured out how they could, produce the SLT system in a production knife, the next step was trying to figure out how to get the action consistent with the other ZT models. So Zero Tolerance is known for very clean, explosive action. And so if they produced a knife that didn't have that ZT action that we've come to know and love, people would obviously be disappointed. So with regard, and I'm not a knife maker, but with regard to action on a flipper, you have the, the strength on the lockbar, you have the detent ball placement, the size of the detent ball, the depth of the detent ball in regard to the, the blade here. You have the position in regard to the flipper tab as well as the pivot. So you've got this formula that essentially you create to get this consistent action, but when you're making a whole new system, they had to start from essentially ground zero. So it took quite a few different prototypes over several months to find that perfect fit to where it still had that ZT action that people have come to know and love and expect on zero tolerance knives. So that was the second part of the difficulty or of the equation in producing this. And so you guys can see, very explosive. You can take up and you can fire, or you can just go all the way back. So yeah. Alright, let's see what else. Again, we might see this on some other knives. One of the interesting things is the width here from the top to the bottom is as small or as narrow as the SLT system can be. So if you'd hope to see this on a knife, maybe the size of the, the 450 or the 460 won't be happening simply because of the mechanics of the design. This is as narrow as they can get it. So it's going to be reserved for larger knives, which is, it is what it is. So, all right. I think that is just about it. Just taking a quick look at the notes. Yeah, so very cool knife, very cool offering. Love the SLT system. You guys won't be disappointed. Everyone that I handed it to at Blade Show was really impressed by the knife. So we'll go ahead and leave it there. Thanks so much for watching, guys. These should hit the market in the next 4 to 6 weeks if all is well and good. And of course there will be some slight changes that hopefully I'll outline in a different video once I can get my hands on one of those. So thanks so much for watching, and if you like the video, give me a thumbs up. You can always follow me on Instagram as Epic Snuggle Bunny for daily content. Take care.